The big hits, the quest failed screens, the multiplayer. If what you're into is beating the hell out of beautiful innocent creatures and using their skin and bones to make yourself a new pair of pants, nothing hits like Monster Hunter. Everyone's ideal Monster Hunter experience is going to be the one that they started with. So I compare everything to Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. Monster Hunter has come a long way since 2013 or indeed 2004. I'm still not really used to its AAA mainstream presentation. I still think of them as kind of niche 3DS games. Some good comes out of its new identity though. 2018's Monster Hunter World, which made some huge changes to streamline the gameplay and sold like crazy because of it, made loading screens between areas hard to go back to. I have a feeling that Monster Hunter Wilds is going to make going back to World feel the same way. Monster Hunter Wilds is a direct sequel to Monster Hunter World, and follows its philosophy for what makes a good Monster Hunter game. It would have been hard to argue against that, I imagine, given that Monster Hunter World became Capcom's best-selling game ever. The more of it that I play, the more Wilds feels like what World wanted to be from the jump. In between World and Wilds, we got Monster Hunter Rise, a more experimental game intended to satisfy those freaks who prefer Monster Hunter on a handheld. Wilds pulls plenty from Rise, unfortunately including its changes to map traversal and removal of tracking. I love the mixing of old and new monsters in Wilds. The series has always leaned on a kind of fantastical, biological explanation for its creatures, and it would be weird if the characters in every game were always like, "Hey babe, wake up, new dragon just dropped." In Generation 5, there was a push for you to spend more of your time fighting at the expense of everything else. In my mind, though, you need to spend enough time fishing and collecting herbs to ground yourself in the experience, to give you an understanding on the value of a piece of equipment or a consumable. But I get it, these things are seen as needlessly tedious by the mainstream, and you don't sell 25 million copies if you only appeal to weirdos like me. I can accept that mostly because nothing hits like Monster Hunter. Even though Monster Hunter Wilds, as the first Generation 6 game, largely continues in the streamlining of the series for mainstream appeal, it's still Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter combat is among the best in gaming, both solo and multiplayer. Its laser-honed combat design creates these accidental feats of teamwork as each player works towards their individual weapons' combat goals. Of the pillars that hold up a Monster Hunter game, combat is definitely the strongest and most central. Now you could, and people do, very broadly compare it to a Souls game. Big swords, big bosses, and dodge rolls. Ignoring that Monster Hunter predates Demon's Souls by a few years, I wonder if From Software's games getting so big has led to more people giving Monster Hunter a shot. Monster Hunter fights broadly have a few phases. First contact, when you, or the monster, land that first hit and the fight begins. Some blows are exchanged and the monster will become angry, and their attacks will become faster and more aggressive. Some monsters have unique mechanics that only apply when they're enraged, often to do with status effects. The monster will then either cool off or run away. The cool off usually happens after you deal enough damage. The monster calms down and goes back to their level of aggression and moveset they had pre-Angie. And the runaway is a more exaggerated version of that, where the monster will physically leave the area to get a snack or take a nap to regain energy. Chasing a monster who has run away will give you a chance to sharpen your weapon, reapply buffs, or even find a camp to restock. We then have a reprisal of that first contact phase where you often get another chance at a sneak attack or a jump attack. From there, the monster will shuffle through those phases semi-randomly until the hunt is over. Often that last runaway retreat being to a set location for each type of monster. Some hunts will task you with hunting more than one monster at a time, and occasionally extra monsters will appear to throw a wrench in things. But if the quest doesn't specify that you need to hunt something, taking it down is not going to be required. Monster Hunter's combat is just as concerned with when and how you hit as it is with where you hit. Monsters have always had breakable parts that yield unique drops if hit with the right kind of damage, like how cutting damage can sever a tail or how blunt attacks to the head cause stuns. Wilds, though, takes this a step further with with the wounds system. Now every monster has more breakable parts, and targeting them is easier than it's ever been. With this focus mode, you can see what parts are ready to be broken and use a special move to deal a bunch of damage to those specific areas. This has changed how combat flows, but in a way that I really like. Some weapons even have unique interactions with these wounds outside of the R1 moves that just hit extra hard. Each of the 14 weapons have wildly different movesets and mechanics with a spectrum of complexity that kinda looks like this. I would call myself a greatsword main. It's dead simple, but dead satisfying. Greatsword gets like 1.5 combo routes, and your main goal is just to hit very hard. Despite that, it has a lot of versatility, with Greatsword being one of a handful of weapons that can block, so you get your power clashes and the ability to stand your ground on top of really high damage. And its offset, which is another new mechanic in Wilds that's basically a parry, is one of the easier ones to set up and execute. I love running a pocket hunting horn on my Greatsword setup specifically because of how simple the Greatsword is. The lack of a meter to manage or really specific attack strings to go for means that I have no problem switching back to the horn whenever I need to reapply buffs. I've played with people who separate the weapons into tank, DPS, and support roles, and just... no, that's not how Monster Hunter works. There are ways to build more and less supportive setups, but those are mostly weapon agnostic. You just play the one you like. Solo play is just as viable and maybe even easier than multiplayer because of how powerful palicos are in Wilds. In previous games, your cat companions were more specialized. You had to pick which abilities you wanted them to use, and you even had ones that were more spec'd towards gathering. In Wilds, your palico levels up linearly and seems to have access to everything a palico can do at all times. It seems like my palico is always ready to heal me or cure a status whenever I need it, as well as setting up traps and flash flies as assists. I think they may participate in direct combat less than they used to compensate. I haven't witnessed, say, a palico cut a tail off, for example, but they are still extremely useful as supports for solo or duo play. In addition to your usual palico companion, Monster Hunter Wilds gives you a Seikret, a feathered wyvern that you use as a mount. Your Seikret does a lot more than cart you around, though. It kind of serves as a mobile base of operations. On quests, supplies will be delivered straight to your Seikret periodically to keep you stocked up on the basics. You can also store a secondary weapon on your Seikret that you can swap to at any time while riding it. This has opened me up to weapons that I never took the time to learn in past games. Being able to have that pocket hunting horn or a bowgun lets me take advantage of the unique features of those weapons, while still allowing me to swing around my beloved greatsword most of the time. You can also gather almost anything from your Seikret's back, allowing you to sprint at full speed, vacuuming up every bug and herb you pass. The Seikret is useful to a fault, maybe even. As a quest starts, your Seikret immediately knows where the target monster is and will navigate you there automatically. There is no supply box at base camps anymore because of the previously mentioned supply deliveries. In combat, you can hop on it pretty much whenever to sharpen, switch weapons, heal, or escape much more safely than you would be able to without it. Now, sure, you can be knocked off of it by monster attacks, but its speed makes that unlikely, and maybe a touch too safe most of the time. That speed while gathering also feels a bit much. You have to remember that I come from this era of Monster Hunter, so this feels too streamlined sometimes. That said, I can stop to smell the flowers whenever I want, I suppose. Wilds gives plenty of opportunity after all. For as much utility as hook-slingering a piece of honey from the back of your Seikret has, the game doesn't force you to do it that way. If you turn off the Seikret's automatic navigation, there's a lot to like in these environments. Even within the same map, there's such variety and creativity on display in these surreal landscapes. Taking an extra moment to pick up an herb by hand or do some fishing really allows you to appreciate all the work that went into crafting these spaces. Among those things to do while wandering the maps is a system rework that I really like: pop-up camps. Instead of how it worked in World, where you had to stumble across new camps but then couldn't interact with them in any way until you went back to town and activated them, you now just set down a tent like it's nothing and can immediately use it to restock or switch equipment loadouts. The potential for a monster to destroy your pop-up camp doesn't have that much mechanical significance, at least it hasn't for me so far, but it does lend some extra tangibility to the world that I do appreciate. It would be weird to watch a Rathalos just walk past a tent and not try to do something about it. In general, it feels like Capcom took a hard look at previous games in the series and sought ways to improve mechanics and better convey the improvements. I want to highlight Wild's iteration on monster mounting. Introduced back in 4th gen, it was never the deepest mechanic, but it served its purpose as a way to make use of the verticality that game had. 5th gen had some ideas about how to make better use of the mechanic, but neither World nor Rise felt like they had developed the definitive monster mounting system. Wilds, though, I think they might have cracked it with this one. On the surface, it looks basically the same as how it worked in 4U or World, but it's really synergizing with that new wound system to create an actual gameplay experience with, like, choices and risk and reward. Before, you were just mashing a button to fill a bar fast enough. Now you are strategically creating wounds on the monster's back and choosing when to exploit one with a special move or when to move on to a new spot based on how much stamina you and the monster have left. You can still basically use it the way you would have in an older game, but if you're paying attention, you can get a lot more out of it in a way that feels more intuitive than it ever has. Good stuff. Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate was my first Monster Hunter experience, but Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate was the first one I was hyped for pre-release. It has such a unique visual identity and story presentation, so Wilds doesn't have to try too hard to get you thinking about it when you see this, or this, or this, or maybe one more big one in Endgame. Now, I'm pretty sure the only significance of all the 4U references is that game is turning 10 years old this year. If you're new to the series, I don't think that playing 4U is a prerequisite for enjoying Wilds. I just think it's neat. Okay, remember how I said in 5th gen they wanted you to spend more time fighting at the expense of everything else? Well, 6th gen handles that a little bit differently. This time they want you to spend an inordinate amount of your time experiencing a narrative. There is so much talking in this game. Not to say that older games in the series didn't have plot, but I don't think it's ever gotten in the way as much as it does in this one. I am not one to normally skip cutscenes in games. I'll click through dialogue boxes, sure, but I'm never immediately reaching for the skip button once a more directed scene starts. But man, it is too much in Wilds. You can't even skip all of it. There's plenty of walk and talk sequences where you technically still have control of your character, so the normal cutscene controls are not accessible. Narrative is not what I come to Monster Hunter for. It never has been, but better execution would have gone a long way to make it less annoying. Capcom clearly doesn't see it the way that I do, and sales numbers might justify even more annoying and intrusive narratives in future games. Fortunately though, it does end and leave you to your own devices after you do the big climax fight. And really, if you just beeline the story quests the whole time, it isn't that different of an experience than playing low-rank village quests in older games. Most Monster Hunter games really begin at high rank anyway, which is where the story leaves you after credits. At the time of writing, I'm about 15 hours removed from rolling those credits for the first time, and I'm honestly beginning to forget just how annoying it was. For some reason, in Monster Hunter World, Capcom made connecting with other players a lot more complicated than it used to be. You had big lobbies that had too much going on to be able to pay attention to all of it, and then SOS flares made organizing hunts kind of irrelevant. This created a more isolating feeling when I was playing Monster Hunter World back in the day, even though I was connected to the internet and connected to other players for virtually 100% of my time playing. Wilds largely adopts the same system, and it has that same isolating feeling. Most of my multiplayer experience in this game is having my SOS flares go up automatically and having people gradually fill in as the quest goes on. And then, with there being no way to easily stay grouped up with those people post-quest, everybody clears out only to do the same thing again with a new group of randos. Okay, I do just want to jump in here. I wrote and recorded that last paragraph and actually cut a good bit out a while ago. I've since played a lot more of the game since I wrote that, and I made it sound a lot worse than it actually was because I was pretty frustrated when I wrote that. Yeah, it is more complicated than it needs to be, a lot more complicated than it needs to be, but it's not that bad. Link parties do actually kind of solve a lot of the problems that I had, but the thing that actually improves the experience a lot more is playing in squads. Squads work kind of like guilds and MMOs. Every squad has its own private lobby instance that they can join. And posted quests are a lot more likely to be responded to in squad lobbies than in the open lobbies. I don't know. The multiplayer, I stand by, it is way too complicated for what it is, but it's not that bad. Monster Hunter has the incredible capacity for being a very social game. The old way of doing things could have you running quests for hours with the same crew of randos online because there was more friction in finding a new squad than staying. Now it's flipped. There is way more friction in attempting to play with the same group over and over again rather than requeuing every quest. Everything's a bit too impersonal for me, but that's honestly the direction most online multiplayer games have been going for a while. So I've heard a few longtime fans say that there's nothing to do once you get to high rank, and I think that is because they are expecting the content to be here instead of here. Every previous game had a pretty rigid loop to it. It goes, pick a quest, load into the quest, beat the monster, go back to town and make yourself stronger, repeat. There are usually other things to do, but that loop is how you will spend most of your time in virtually all of the games of the series. Wild's greatest departure from series tradition is in this aspect. There certainly are quests at the counter to do, but you'll find that there's just not that many there at first. If you're expecting the content to be clearly laid out at the counter, I can see looking at this and going, well, there's nothing to do. What Capcom seems to want you to be doing instead is opening up the map, seeing what monsters are around, and picking one to fight. You can create a quest from the map screen, which is then visible to everyone in your lobby to join from the quest counter. You also cook your meals from anywhere, and they last a set number of minutes instead of lasting for just one quest. They want you to be wandering around the maps, mining, fishing, establishing camps, and eating when you need to, all the while watching which monsters are appearing and taking them on when you see fit. It's a much more open-ended structure that I don't know if I'm totally sold on, but I see the value in how it solidifies the Monster Hunter fantasy of being a heavily armed park ranger. So, is Wilds my new favorite Monster Hunter game? No, actually, it is not Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. The story is too long and too disruptive in low rank, the system for connecting players is just as overcomplicated as it was in World, and I do think Monster Hunter is made worse by the removal of any kind of tracking gameplay. That being said, it's still Monster Hunter. An extremely satisfying and dynamic combat system, a loot grind with purpose and genuine challenge, and wildly imaginative environments are what make Monster Hunter work at a basic level. Wilds, despite making a lot of kind of questionable changes to the format, maintains that core well enough for me to want to sink in a few hundred hours by the time I'm done. So, I thank you a lot for watching. I'm sort of, I guess, considering this video a reboot of my channel. If you watched those videos I made a couple years ago and are sticking around, I really thank you for sticking around. And if you haven't seen those, I'm still pretty proud of those, so go back and watch those. I think they're pretty good. I've also been streaming on Twitch more consistently. On my Twitch page, I have whatever my current stream schedule is. At the moment, at the time that I am doing this, it is Tuesdays and Fridays, Tuesday nights and Friday mornings. So feel free to come and hang out there. Part of what I'm going to be doing on those streams is kind of going through my replay backlog. So games that I really, really like, that I haven't played in a few years, just excuses to play games that I like. Most of them are pretty old. The list I have right now, almost none of the games I think are less than 10 years old. So if you want to look at some old games with me, feel free to come and hang out. But yeah, I really thank you a lot for watching. I guess that's it. Bye.